my name is Michelle Vincent, and I am an active duty police officer. I work for York Regional Police, and I've been an officer for 17 years. I'm also a mental health therapist, and I deal primarily with first responders dealing with traumatic events. And I'm part of a multitude of mental health supports for our first responders within our organization as well. I'm really happy to be presenting and working with you all today.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Michael Smith. I'm a PhD candidate in the Industrial Organizational Psychology program with a specialization on leadership development and coaching. Just a quick background, I did 26 years of active duty in the Air Force, transitioned to the civilian sector where I was a leader in a Berkshire Hathaway company for 6 years. Last year, I quit my corporate job to start my own business in consulting, coaching, and training. Excited about it, and thank you all so much for taking time out of your day.
Hello from California. My name is Kimberley Cox. I have been with Walden University since 2008 as a faculty member in the School of Psychology. And before we begin our presentation, we would like to thank the Academic Skills Center and Dr. William Schultz, Founding Director of Walden Center for Social Change, for this opportunity today. And we thank all of you who have joined us today as well.
So the agenda will go over some learning outcomes. Dr. Cox will present on research and social change. Michelle will then present on applying knowledge and skills to enact positive social change. And again, she's from Toronto, Canada. I'll be taking applying knowledge and skills to a real-world tragedy. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then at the end of this session, we will have a facilitated Q&A and discussion. So today there are two overarching learning outcomes that we want everyone to take away from this. And those are being able to explain the relationship between research and social change. And then secondly, to describe how skills acquired or honed through educational pursuits can generate positive social change for individuals, organizations, communities, and societies, both where we live and work every day.
In the next two slides, I will address the first learning objective about the relationship between research and social change. To begin, I will describe three main qualities or roles of the scholar practitioner in this relationship. Then I'll talk about the connection between a social problem and a research problem. And last, I will share a visual representation of the research-social change relationship. So a scholar practitioner maintains a balance of both passion about a particular social problem and objectivity. They do this by engaging in critical thinking. They conduct research to gather evidence about the problem and its potential solutions, and they engage in or enact positive social change based on the evidence. Now, what you may have noticed from this description is that scholar practitioners need to possess a set of skills to carry out their roles. And this skill set is something that can be developed and strengthened, and Walden University provides the opportunity for doing so. For the scholar practitioner, one of the initial steps in the research process is conceptualizing a social problem into a research problem. Now, a social problem typically refers to an issue or condition that has negative consequences for a large group of people or society. A research problem is a topic you study to understand. It is an academic problem that warrants further investigation because it represents a gap in the research literature, and its study will contribute to one's discipline. For the scholar practitioner, the transition from a social problem to research problem is accomplished in a few ways. First, by gathering current relevant evidence that a research problem exists in the discipline or professional field. So in other words, there is a gap in the research literature, something we do not yet know about the social problem. By then evaluating that evidence for bias and credibility, by checking one's own assumptions to remain objective, and this requires critical thinking and also self-awareness of one's own biases and how they might be expressed in one's work. And last, by forming a persuasive academic argument to justify the relevance and currency of the research problem. A scholar practitioner's argument is academic, such that it is based on evidence, not emotions or opinions. And by doing so, this lends credibility to their work. A visual representation of the relationship between research and social change is shown in this figure. Now, the research process is complex, but the intention of this simplified figure is to show that a social problem can lead to a research project through the conceptualization of a research problem. The findings from that research project then inform potential social change implications. Then, through engagement in social change based on the evidence, the social problem is addressed, and in such a way that the lives of individuals, organizations, institutions, communities, and our cultures have improved as a result of the research being conducted. So we come full circle. And for the scholar practitioner, it is this circle or cycle that guides their work. It is now my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Michelle Vincent and Michael Smith, who as scholar practitioners will share with you how they are applying their knowledge and skills to affect positive social change.
First of all, I would like to say thank you to Dr. Cox for her introduction into this, and thank you, Michael, as well. And so basically, I became very passionate about mental health in first responders after seeing so many of my colleagues who they're like family. We spend a lot of time together, a lot more than in most professions. I've watched them suffer in silence as a result of the traumatic events that they've repeatedly attended over their years of service. A good friend of mine and a platoon mate died by suicide with his service firearm, leaving behind his 2 adoring boys. And how do first responders, or primarily police, get to that point of being in so much pain, or even just living on with it? So here we have some statistics of first responders dying by suicide. And although these are somewhat up to date, I can tell you that the actual reported statistics are not reflective of the actual suicides. We're still working on having people come forward and letting others know that they have died by suicide. Hi, Dr. Schultz. Yes.
Hey, Michelle, this is Bill Schultz. Could you go back to that slide for a second? So when you were explaining the unreported incidents, is that part of why maybe there's I was really taken by how the paramedics were affected in this. Obviously, the police data alone is worrisome and disturbing, but the paramedic, do you think maybe what's happening is the paramedic folks report this more accurately? Because they're kind of off the chart.
That's a really good question, Dr. Schultz. And actually, I would say that the numbers in terms of proportion are accurate. Paramedics are known to have a much higher rate of suicide than the rest of the first responders, and police come in second at that. So that's a good question, and I do believe that they are also very much underreported.
Wow, right. Interesting. Thank you.
No problem. It's a really great question. So basically, I was sort of just mentioning about the economics of this and the impact that it has, the impact that mental health has on the economical aspects. If we look at mental health crisis and first responders, like the numbers we can see speak for themselves. Police officers are twice as likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder when they're involved in a shooting. And in Canada, we have approximately 70,000 first responders and veterans, of which 42% have experienced some form of PTSD. That's just huge. That's just a huge number. And then other shocking statistics include a study with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, that's our RCMP, our Canadian Police Service, in which 44.5% out of a population of 5,813 participants were found to screen positively for serious mental health issues, ranging from anxiety and depression to PTSD and operational stress injury. So with mental health or mental illness in the Canadian labor force resulting in a productivity loss of over 21 billion, which is just huge, it's imperative that we look at how we mitigate and minimize these costs by implementing the resources that speak to the need. So we touched briefly on the exorbitant costs from the loss of productivity at work as a result of mental health issues. And policing is one of the top 5 occupations policing is one of the top 5 occupations. Our workplace compensation has allowed for claims of operational stress injury and PTSD in the last 5 years, according to our presumptive legislation, which is probably unique to us, that deems it's expected that the traumas we're exposed to may lead to such mental health illnesses. Of course, paramedics, as you mentioned, Dr. Schultz, are much higher in this area, and they also are part of this group. The great news is, as a result, it means that we're going to be cared for in our time of need. Now, this is only in Ontario, believe it or not, the presumptive legislation. I'm not familiar with the other provinces in Canada. I know that Quebec does not have this presumptive legislation. These same mental health illnesses that are so common in our profession, as I mentioned, we're 2 to 3 times more likely to incur them, also contribute significantly to physical illness, increased healthcare costs, and early mortality. And of course, I don't think I need to explain about how the physical healthcare would be impacted. And losing a parent or a family member is also, even just from an economical perspective, is very impactful. So these healthcare costs are 5 times greater when we're treating a first responder with PTSD than one without PTSD. So it's easy to see how scientifically based interventions and resources are worth their financial investment. So how, might you ask, has Walden University's application of knowledge and skills enacted positive social change in this area? So for me, it's a multitude of aspects, including coursework, such as advanced research design and methods and program evaluation, growing my skills in researching gaps and effective solutions to fill those gaps, from program development to supporting the implementation of effective resources. Other skill sets that have supported my ability to enact positive social change are literature research, needs analysis, data analysis, and critical thinking, which have increased my confidence in all of these areas. And what's wonderful about this is those skills have allowed me to take the information you see on the left side of the slide and transition that information into identifiable gaps in service. In this particular case, as first responders, we have limited affordable services and treatment options. There's a lack of dialogue and information exchange among support groups, leading to the isolation of research, treatment, and prevention that are not shared for improved outcome. And the most important gap that I've noticed, and that I know most of us have noticed in this field, is that we have no safe physical place for our first responders experiencing crisis, a mental health, specifically a mental health crisis. So my solution for this gap is The Haven. And The Haven is Ontario's proposed first nonprofit mental health and wellness treatment center for first responders. And it's under the umbrella of Quebec's very successful, it's called La Vigile. And The Haven will provide occupational specific, leading edge, medically supervised mental health care, as well as preventative wellness, which will significantly reduce costs in time off work as a result of occupational stress injuries. And it will also provide respite care for anniversaries of critical incidents that people might have experienced where they might need that extra mental health support. So here's an operational chart of how The Haven will provide services. And you can have a look at this. You can see on the left-hand side we have internal, which would be inpatient programs and resources. They're able to stay as long as they want for and work on whatever they would like to work on. It is very, very customized and occupational specific, with the cultural pieces in mind of our first responders. And on the right-hand side, you can see the external and outpatient programming that's available, which is just as fantastic, all provided by very specialized service providers who are trained in trauma. So on a final note, it's our goal to obtain some government-assisted funding for this occupational-specific mental health treatment center exclusive to first responders and uniformed personnel, which I personally believe will improve staff satisfaction and morale, as it will make our first responders feel valued by their organizations as they endorse this endeavor. And It will reduce productivity, loss, and performance-related issues that can cost from a liability perspective. And it will reduce PTSD and suicide. The Haven will overcome barriers to timely success. That's huge. Timely success is something where wait lists and whatnot. When people are in crisis, especially first responders, they need that care immediately. So it'll overcome the time barriers to access the care, promoting the best practices and excellence. And I think the final thought that I really want to leave everybody with is, as first responders, it's our job to help you and our communities. We aren't supposed to need the help ourselves. So support us in making sure that we are well enough to help you.
Yes, thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate it. So now I'm going to talk real quick about applying knowledge and skills to a real-world tragedy. A little more than 1 year ago, on October 1st of 2017, a gunman opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay onto a group of concert goers, approximately 22,000 people who were attending this concert across the street at an outdoor open-air venue, and he had a direct line of sight into the crowd. That tragic incident left 58 dead and more than 800 people injured. Now, this was on a Sunday night, approximately 10 o'clock at night. So by the time everyone woke up the next morning on October 2nd, all the chaos and the media coverage just kind of caused, as you can imagine, a whirlwind. That shooting resulted in the deadliest mass shooting committed by an individual in the entire United States in modern time. So on the morning of October 2nd, I received a call as part of the trauma intervention support team, and we had to respond to the command center at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. And one of the reasons I got called is, as a first sergeant in the military, I've always enjoyed counseling and helping others. So I got certified as a trauma intervention counselor for the city. And so there was a small group of us that was called to lend support to those that were also on site. So the initial thought process when this all kicked off, as you can imagine, was one of just utter chaos, confusion, worry, fear, stress. And so we had to deal with all of that and just even trying to wrap our hands around how to initially start. But what I can tell you is during that initial crisis response, I was able to use my knowledge and skills that I had from previous experiences, but same knowledge and skills that were honed and fine-tuned as a result of going through the Walden doctoral program in IO psychology. And then also I was able to apply the principles of service to others before self and helping to make a positive social impact at such a chaotic time. So as we were going through this whole chain of events and providing the counseling support services, there was 3 stages that we went through. The very first stage in response and providing counseling and comfort was to the victims and their families and friends. Now, a good majority of people actually drove into that concert, this huge outdoor concert, from the surrounding states of California, Arizona, and Utah. As you can imagine, they were totally lost and didn't know what to do or trying to find their loved ones. And so we had to assist in getting them to the right place and the right point and in touch with the right people so they could be reconnected with their families. And again, with that influx of people, it was really hard for everyone to find a place to stay. So we assisted with that through the hotels and local outreach centers to try and take care of that too while we were doing the counseling. The second stage, and this was probably the most difficult for me, was to provide that trauma counseling to the first responders. So during that time, again, with the first responders, when they were going through stage 1, Michelle just kind of talked about this, they were just so focused on the mission of helping and serving and getting that critical care, that initial triage, getting people to the hospital, that they really didn't even have time to take in what was going on, what was happening, and what they were doing. So once the initial several days settled down and we started dealing with them, that's when the importance of having things available like the group that I'm a part of, like the Haven that Michelle mentioned, that just really, really brought the importance to light of what the first responders go through. And it was kind of the same thing in the military. They were just so busy taking care of other people that they really didn't even have time to address themselves and take care of themselves. But once they got that done, then we started dealing with them. And again, that was probably the most difficult thing for me. And then the final stage was, sorry, I just lost my screen here, was dealing with the local community. So in the local community, as you can imagine, again, with all the chaos here that was, and all the national attention that was brought on Las Vegas because of this incident, the local community, a lot of times when we see things on the news, one of the first things we think of is, that always happens somewhere else. Thank goodness it hasn't happened here. That'll never happen in my backyard. So just that whole thought process of when it does happen and you need to respond, it really takes back the community. Even people that weren't necessarily there, didn't know anyone there. But again, this happened in our own backyard. So then we even had to deal with the local community. And again, that was mostly working with local churches and local organizations just to kind of reach out and help with the counseling services, again, just to kind of give people that reassurance that it was going to be okay. So now how does all this correlate to what we do in terms of being scholar practitioners with Walden? It definitely resulted in positive social change impact with the trauma intervention support. I can't tell you how many thanks we got, how many tears we shared with people, how many hugs. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. When you know that you provided a service to help comfort someone during something like, I can't even put words on to what the scene was like. But anyhow, when you can do that, that's what makes it all worthwhile. So again, some of the bullet points there is the victims' families and friends were comforted. The community offered support. Everyone banded together to bring pillows and blankets and food and water and just everything. Just the outpouring of support was just beautiful. And much like the Haven, because of this particular incident, there were new nonprofit organizations formed within the Las Vegas Valley for something specifically just like this. So what skills did I learn through the PhD program and especially the dissertation process with Walden University is I was able to fine-tune the skills of coaching specifically for this scenario. And what I mean by that is assessing what we were really supposed to do and then staying focused on that particular objective. Ethics and standards. When you're counseling and coaching, there are certain ethics and standards that apply to the way you do that, the way you handle yourself, and the way you conduct business. Additionally, we were briefed initially by the FBI and local law enforcement, when we were helping these people and talking to them, not to discuss the case, anything we knew about it, what we saw in the news, not to speculate. So from that perspective, we had kind of some marching orders from them to, again, just to stick with what we were there to do and focus on helping people. The last two, the critical thinking and the organization, prioritization, and then task management, that was probably the biggest thing because we did not have a lot of time to hit the ground and start comforting and helping people. So it was almost on the fly, and I correlate that to the dissertation process where, when you're going through coursework, everything's kind of paced and scheduled for you. In the dissertation, it's a totally different animal. You have to stay on your game, keep your priorities straight, keep an eye on your time. So from that aspect, it was very similar to that. Very, very much crunch time. Not a lot of time to think. It had to all be done on your toes. So even though I had some of that experience before, the experience of going through the dissertation process just amplified it many times over.